Hi, today I'm going to talk to you about my teaching stance and pedagogical position that we've developed after 4 years of studying at Deakin University. So over these years of studying teaching methods and educational standards, we're asked as student teachers how we see our pedagogical position and our philosophy. So we are often asked why we want to teach and how you can make or how we can make a difference to our students' life. So my pedagogical position is that teaching is just one part of being an educator. You also need to be supportive, caring, passionate, patient, understandable and knowledgeable. So in saying that, I want to strive to be a teacher that creates a supportive, differentiated and inclusive classroom for all my students. I will also include John Hattie's theory on timely and effective feedback, which I think is a really big part of my pedagogy and really important to my students with their learning. I also want to address learning difficulties and understand the cultural backgrounds from students. So I want to bring my students into the 21st century by embracing new technologies and creating multimodal lessons to help engage all. So my teaching philosophy also includes student-directed and independent learning, where students are motivated and encouraged to determine their own learning outcomes or goals. As a teacher, I hope that I will always be open to self-reflection and advice with a theory that you are always learning and gaining new knowledge every day. So once graduated, I would hope to see myself as a facilitator of learning rather than an expert who simply delivers the information to the students. So one such stance that I feel strongly about and one that has shaped my teaching philosophy is bringing and implementing differentiation within the classroom. So we all know that students learn in different ways and at different rates, so why teach the same content in the same way? It just doesn't work. Students just don't learn like that. They have their own learning styles. So 1.5 in the ATSOR's Professional Knowledge Standard states that differentiation is needed when teaching to meet the specific learning needs of students across a full range of abilities. So this includes recognising students' learning needs and how they are catered for within the classroom, and it also includes us as teachers reflecting on our teaching strategies and varying them for the individual. So the inclusive education, which is set out by the Victorian Government, has strong links to why a classroom or school needs to be inclusive, with their standard of curriculum programs being designed in such a way that all needs of the students are catered for. So this is a high priority on my list when planning a lesson sequence, as I stated as part of my stance. So a lesson that I recently was involved with included the implementation of new ideas and concepts in a mathematics lesson. So instead of directing the same questions to all the students while we're doing our mini lesson on the floor, I differentiated my questioning to cater for the different levels. So it was all about telling time to the half hour. So in year one, they're working towards telling, Osval states that they're working towards telling the time to the half hour. So my questioning was directed at students that needed to be refreshed about telling the time to the hour, because that had been picked up in a pre-assessment. So there was also something coming out of the pre-assessment was that students knew, there was 4 or 5 students that knew how to tell the time to the minute or even to the quarter hour, which that means that they needed extending. So my questioning was differentiated in a way that everyone could be involved. So examples were, what time would it be if the little hand was on the 9 and the big hand was on the 12? So using visual cues, I would then ask the appropriate student this question. Then another question would be, if I started school at 9 o'clock and we were in maths for 45 minutes, what time would it be then? So this sort of questioning allowed for all students to be involved within the mini lesson and gave the students a chance to contribute to the discussion. So not necessarily the students needing to know that a clock is made up of quarter hours or 15 minutes to understand that 9 hours and 45 minutes equals 9:45 when putting it on the board. So from there we could build on the terminology and theory behind telling the time for these students. So as I mentioned, with the pre-assessment and prior knowledge of these students, I was then able to identify the learning content that was needed for the groups, and it also, the mini lesson also allowed for students that were not so quick in picking up the content or not shy or not forthcoming in showing their understanding the time to express this. So by including all students in the discussion and teaching differentiation, different responses were generated, which then with the pre-assessment allowed me to determine the activity or groups as I mentioned before. So not only did this technique allow me to differentiate my teaching, but also allowed all the students to be included and feel equitable, which fits into my philosophy and stance. The method also, I found, benefited the students in a productive way. So one student in particular was very aware that he was in a lower group with some of his mathematical concepts because he wasn't in with his friends. So this whole class approach gave him the confidence to answer some questions that he would not have been available to him had we just put him in the lower group. So he may have just continued to stay there in that group and do the bare minimum because he never got the chance to extend himself or push himself with his peers. So that was one thing that come out of this. So through this lesson, I was able to understand that that us as teachers need to give thought to how we reconceptualize the curriculum experience for each student through making judgments of what might be best for that student at a particular time. Another stance that I want to address is ideas that John Hattie has on timely and appropriate feedback. So this is included in my philosophy and my pedagogy, and one that I feel strongly about. So Hattie believes that students should not mix praise with feedback in order for it to assist students' learning, and we should think of feedback as received, not given. So think about it how the student's receiving it, not how we're giving it to the students. So he states that while students give feedback as correct, why teachers give feedback as corrections or criticism or comments or clarifications, for students it's more used as to where to next. So unless it includes, you know, where we're going to next in that learning content, they tend not to use it. So 5.2 of the Australian Teaching Standards states that teachers can demonstrate an understanding of the purpose of providing timely and appropriate feedback to students about their learning. So my philosophy on feedback is similar to that of Hattie's, and I believe that feedback should be given and used as an effective learning strategy if that feedback is received in a timely way. So if it's received while they're completing that task and not a week later. So feedback that is given while a task is being completed in the classroom can help the student develop their learning strategies, detect errors and recognise relationships between ideas. So one such example I have experienced was while I was in a 5-6 classroom and we were completing persuasive texts. Students were encouraged to come see me with any questions or queries, but they were also expected to use their peer feedback, which was something that we incorporated into their lessons months beforehand. So while roaming around, I encouraged the students to refer back to their structure outline, but also referred to them to the peer feedback as well. So the way that which the feedback was delivered allowed the students to correct or change their learning on the spot without moving on from the task. So it was why they were doing the persuasive piece. So what intrigued me the most with the feedback was witnessing the other students engage with each other and evaluate their own work with other students. So the students were also eager to incorporate the feedback into their writing. With the engagement level and learning level increased, I feel, because of the feedback that was acted upon. So all students within the classroom were encouraged to complete in this type. The last standard that I'm going to address is about inclusivity and providing a safe environment for students. That is outlined by the ATSL's professional knowledge standards for graduate teachers, and it's one that I feel really strongly about and that I've obviously included in my teaching philosophy. So the Victorian Government's inclusive education strategy, along with the Melbourne Declaration of Educational Goals for Young Australians, declares that all schools and teachers and sectors must provide all students with access to high quality schooling that is free from discrimination, which is based on their gender, language, culture, religion, health, disability, socioeconomic background, or their geographical location. So the inclusive education ensures that a supportive and engaging classroom is provided for all students, with it building the value to celebrate and respond to the diversity of their students. So that standard is 4.1 in the ATSL's professional knowledge standards, and it also includes that student teachers or graduate teachers are identifying strategies to support inclusive student participation and engagement in their classroom activities, as stated. So recently in our classroom we had an activity we have an activity at the start of every day where the students put a smiley face next to their name on the interactive whiteboard. This depicts how they feel, or how they think they're feeling for the day. This information provided us this information provides us with the tools to provide a safe and positive learning environment with any positive or negative issues dealt with before any lessons took place. So this was extremely useful when a student had lost a dog the night before, so she put a sad face next to her name. So without this, we would have just thought she was disengaged with the content, and it wasn't. It was just about the emotional issue of losing the dog. Another point that I like to use is I always use praise and encouraging probes when discussing a topic or extracting information from my students. So asking them why they think that when they've given me an answer to a question shows that I'm interested in what their response and the effort that they've put in for their response. So being in the foundation in one classroom that I'm at the moment has allowed me to adapt my teaching to include more hands-on activities. So this is another area for my positive learning environment that has become extremely beneficial to a student with EAL. So through the visual materials, model tasks and authentic tasks, he's able to show me his learning orally and visually instead of writing where he lacks comprehension. So we are working very hard with his parents to include more written elements to his learning, but by differentiating the teaching, he can be involved with all the classroom tasks and feel a part of the learning group. So also last year, while completing a classroom task on placement, students were encouraged to suggest a hero that would form a base for their persuasive hero piece. So they voted for their dad. So while this task was going to be completed as groups, I quickly changed those requirements because this was not going to be inclusive for everyone that may not have had a dad or knows their dad or doesn't like their dad. So this changing strategy allowed the students to write about anyone that is meaningful in their life and did not bring attention to the fact that they had chosen someone different. So by changing the initial lesson plan and the learning, it was now tailored to all the students, with each producing a written piece on their hero pretty much. So after this lesson in particular, I critically reflected on my teaching as outlined in productive pedagogies. And I considered if the students I taught, regardless of their background or their abilities, were engaged in intellectually challenging activities and the relevant curriculum used in the supportive environment that I was trying to create. So although I knew that some students' background in this classroom were different, for this task, I noted that it was extremely important to remember that diversity is evident with all students and to not stereotype an activity such as Father's Day or even at Easter. So they're my three standards that I have included with my teaching stance and my pedagogical position, and hopefully I get a chance next year to implement them.